Rain streaked down the glass windows of the cafe. Sarah sat alone, her fingers wrapped around a warm coffee cup, staring at nothing in particular. The cafe was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in designs and blueprints without anyone asking questions. "Sarah, your 3 o'clock is here," Maya, her assistant, called out. Sarah straightened her blazer and gathered her portfolio. As a successful interior designer in New York, she'd built a reputation for transforming spaces into art. But more importantly, she'd built walls around her heart, walls that had taken 3 years to construct. She walked into the conference room and froze. "Hello, Sarah." That voice, deep, familiar, haunting. "Ethan," her voice came out as barely a whisper. Ethan Carter stood by the window, looking exactly as she remembered, tall, dark-haired, with those piercing blue eyes that once made her believe in forever. The same man who'd vanished from her life 7 years ago without a word. "It's been a long time," he said, a hint of sadness in his smile. "What are you doing here?" Sarah's professional mask slipped for just a moment. "I need an interior designer for my new home. When I heard your name, I thought, maybe it was fate." Fate, the word stung. Fate had brought them together once, and fate had torn them apart. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Memories flooded back, memories she'd worked so hard to bury. They'd met in college. Ethan was studying architecture, and she was in interior design. Their paths crossed on a joint project, and what started as professional collaboration bloomed into something beautiful. Late-night study sessions turned into long walks. Coffee breaks became dinner dates. He was her first love, her best friend, her everything. Then one day, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. He stopped answering her calls, blocked her messages. When she went to his apartment, his roommate said he'd moved out, left the city entirely. Sarah had spent months trying to understand what went wrong. Had she done something, said something? But there were no answers, only silence and a broken heart. She'd eventually picked up the pieces and moved on, or so she told herself. Now, 7 years later, he was back, and her carefully constructed walls were already beginning to crack. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She would take the project, but keep it strictly professional. She couldn't let him hurt her again. The property was a historic brownstone in Brooklyn that Ethan had recently inherited. It needed complete renovation, and Sarah had to admit it was exactly the kind of challenge she loved. "I want to preserve the character, but make it feel like home," Ethan explained as they walked through the dusty rooms. "Like home for how many people?" Sarah asked, her tone deliberately neutral. The question she really wanted to ask was, "Are you married?" "Just me," Ethan said quietly. An awkward silence hung between them until Sarah's phone rang. It was her brother, Marcus, an emergency. "I have to go," she said quickly, grateful for the escape. "Sarah, wait," Ethan started, but she was already heading for the door. At the hospital, Sarah learned that her mother had collapsed. A heart attack. The doctors said she was stable but would need time to recover. As Sarah sat in the sterile waiting room, exhausted and afraid, she heard footsteps approaching. "Ethan." "Maya told me what happened. I came to help," he said softly. "I don't need your help," Sarah replied, her voice sharp with emotion. "Sarah, please, let me explain why I left." Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fear of losing her mother. But something in Sarah broke. "Fine, talk." Ethan sat down beside her, his hands clasped tightly together. 7 years ago, the day I last saw you, I found out something devastating. My father had committed fraud. He'd embezzled millions from his business partner. Sarah's breath caught. That business partner was your father. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her father had died 7 years ago, a sudden heart attack, the doctors had said. But there had always been something her mother wouldn't talk about, something that had changed in the weeks before his death. My father's fraud, the stress it caused, I believe it contributed to your father's death, Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. How could I face you? How could I tell you that my father had killed yours? So you just left. Sarah's eyes blazed with anger and pain. I went to London. I worked every hour I could. Every dollar my father stole, I paid back with interest, anonymously through your Uncle Robert. Sarah's mind reeled. For the past 3 years, mysterious payments had appeared in her family's account. Her uncle had managed them, but never explained their source. You should have told me, Sarah whispered. I was 23, Sarah. I was terrified and ashamed. I thought you'd hate me. So you made that decision for me. You took away my right to choose. Before Ethan could respond, the doctor emerged with an update on her mother. The next day, Sarah went to her Uncle Robert's house. He'd passed away 2 months ago, and she'd been slowly sorting through his belongings. In his study, she found a locked drawer. The key was attached to his pocket watch. She'd kept it as a memento. Inside the drawer was a leather journal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Her uncle had documented everything, every payment from Ethan, every detail of how Ethan had worked himself to exhaustion in London, living in a tiny apartment, eating barely enough to survive, all to repay the debt his father had created. But there was more. Her uncle had written, Ethan Carter is a man of honor. He bears a burden that isn't his to carry, yet he carries it without complaint. Sarah should know the truth, but I've watched the pain in Ethan's eyes when he speaks of her. He stays away because he loves her enough to let her move on. I only wish Sarah knew how rare such love is. Sarah's tears fell onto the pages. Then she found another envelope, a letter in her father's handwriting. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I need you to know something about Ethan Carter. His father betrayed me, yes, but Ethan is not his father. I've seen the way he looks at you, with pure, honest love. I've also learned what he's trying to do to repay everything. I've told him it's not necessary, but he insists. That kind of integrity is rare. When I'm gone, don't let my death stand between you and happiness. Forgive, Sarah. Life is too short for anything else. Love always. Dad. The letter was dated 1 week before her father's death. Sarah confronted her mother when she was strong enough. You knew, Sarah asked. Her mother nodded weakly. Your father told me everything before he died. He never blamed Ethan. In fact, he admired the boy's determination to make things right. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were so hurt when Ethan left. I thought it would be easier for you to hate him than to carry the weight of the truth. Sarah realized then that everyone had been trying to protect her, but in doing so, they'd taken away her choices. She decided to see Ethan to talk properly, but when she arrived at the brownstone, police cars surrounded it. Ethan Carter, an officer was saying, you're under arrest for financial fraud. What? No, Sarah pushed through. There must be a mistake. The detective showed her documents. Ethan's company in London Heritage Restoration, was being investigated for fraud, £50 million missing from client accounts. Ethan looked stunned. That's impossible, I never. The company's in your name, Mr. Carter. You'll need to come with us. As they led him away, Ethan's eyes found Sarah's. In them she saw not guilt, but confusion and fear. Ethan was granted bail, but the damage was done. His reputation was destroyed overnight. Sarah hired the best lawyer she could find. She gathered documents, interviewed former colleagues, traced financial records. She worked day and night, barely sleeping. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan asked when she visited him. "After everything." "Because I know you," Sarah said firmly. "You didn't do this." As they dug deeper, a pattern emerged. The company had indeed been in Ethan's name, but the actual operations were run by someone else, his father's former business partner, Marcus Blackwell. Blackwell had used Ethan's identity to create the company, forged his signatures, and systematically embezzled funds. When the authorities closed in, he'd framed Ethan and disappeared. But why? The answer came from an unexpected source: Ethan's father, still in prison. "Tell Ethan I'm sorry," the old man said when Sarah visited him. "Blackwell came to me for help. He wanted money to bribe officials to get me out early. When I refused, when I told him Ethan would never help him either, he said he'd make Ethan pay. I didn't think he'd go this far." It was revenge, petty, cruel revenge. With this information, Sarah's lawyer built a case. They tracked down Blackwell's communications, found evidence of the forgeries, located witnesses who testified that Ethan had no involvement in the company's operations. 3 months later in court, the truth finally came out. Ethan was cleared of all charges. Blackwell was arrested in Morocco and extradited back to face justice. When the verdict was read, Ethan looked at Sarah, tears streaming down his face. She'd stood by him through everything: the scandal, the media circus, the doubt. Outside the courthouse, away from the cameras, Ethan took her hands. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why did you help me?" "Because 7 years ago you made a choice based on fear and shame. I wasn't going to make the same mistake," Sarah said. "And because despite everything, despite the pain and the years apart, my heart never stopped being yours." They didn't rush into anything. Trust, once broken, needed time to rebuild. They started slowly: coffee dates, walks in the park, working together on the brownstone renovation. This time they talked about everything. No secrets, no running away. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted one evening. "Scared that I'll hurt you again, scared that I'm not enough." "We're both scared," Sarah replied. "But this time we're scared together, that's the difference." The brownstone became their joint project, a symbol of building something new from something broken. One day, while working on the basement renovation, Sarah discovered a hidden door behind a false wall. "Ethan, look at this." Behind the door was a small room, and in it an old safe. It took them hours to crack it open, but when they did, they found documents belonging to Sarah's father. "How are these here?" Ethan's voice was barely audible. As they read through them, the pieces fell into place. Sarah's father had been investigating Ethan's father before his death. He'd known the fraud was coming. He'd even tried to warn Ethan. But the most shocking discovery was a sealed letter addressed to both of them. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Sarah and Ethan, if you're reading this together, then perhaps fate has been kinder than I feared. Ethan, I know what your father did, but I also know who you are. Don't let his sins define you. You are not your father, just as Sarah is not me. Sarah, if you love this young man, and I believe you do, don't let pride or pain stand in your way. Love is rare and precious. Fight for it. I've hidden these documents in Ethan's inherited property because I suspect he'll need them someday. I've also left evidence of your father's crimes, Ethan, not to punish him further, but so you have the truth. Build your lives on truth and forgiveness. That's all any of us can do. With love, James Morrison. Both of them were crying now, years of pain and confusion finally making sense. He knew, Sarah whispered. Dad knew we belonged together. 6 months later, the brownstone renovation was complete. Ethan threw a completion party. But when Sarah arrived, she found only Ethan, surrounded by candles and roses. What is all this? She asked, though her heart already knew. Ethan got down on one knee. Sarah Morrison, 7 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I walked away from you. I let fear and shame dictate my choices. But you taught me something important, that love isn't about running away. It's about standing together, even when things are hard. He pulled out a ring. I can't promise that life will be perfect, but I can promise that I'll never run again. I'll never hide the truth. I'll fight for us every single day. Will you marry me? Sarah's vision blurred with tears. Yes, Ethan. Yes, I'll marry you, but on one condition. Anything. No more secrets. No more decisions made in isolation. We face everything together from now on. I promise, Ethan said, slipping the ring onto her finger. Together. They married in the brownstones garden 6 months later. A small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family. Sarah's mother walked her down the aisle, tears of joy streaming down her face. Even Ethan's father sent a letter from prison, an apology and a blessing. As they exchanged vows, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain, the betrayal, the long years apart, all of it had led to this moment. I was wrong about the title, Sarah whispered to Ethan as they swayed together during their first dance. What title? My heart betrayed me. My heart didn't betray me. It led me home, to you. Ethan smiled, pulling her closer. Then maybe we should call it My Heart Knew All Along. Perfect, Sarah said, resting her head on his shoulder. Sarah stood in the nursery of the brownstone, painting soft clouds on the pale blue walls. Her hand rested on her swollen belly as she worked. Need help? Ethan appeared in the doorway, carrying paint supplies. I need you to stop worrying, Sarah laughed. I'm pregnant, not fragile. I know, but let me help anyway. They worked together in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from true partnership. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Sarah asked. Sometimes, Ethan admitted. If I'd stayed 7 years ago, if I'd told you the truth instead of running. We weren't ready then, Sarah said thoughtfully. We were kids playing at being adults. We needed to grow to become who we are now. Maybe you're right. Maybe we needed to be broken before we could be whole. That evening, as they sat on the brownstone's porch watching the sunset, Sarah reflected on their journey. Yes, her heart had led her through pain. Yes, there had been betrayal and loss. But there had also been growth, forgiveness, and ultimately, a love stronger than either of them had imagined possible. Sometimes the heart doesn't betray us, it tests us. And if we're brave enough to listen, to trust, to fight for what matters, It leads us exactly where we need to be. I love you, Ethan said, kissing her temple. I love you too, Sarah replied. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for fighting for us when I couldn't. And as the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, two people who'd been broken and lost found themselves exactly where they belonged. Together, finally, forever. The end. The heart doesn't betray us. Sometimes it simply knows before we do that the longest way around is the shortest way home.